Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Professor Dave Farina, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct, is joining us here, and we're going to be talking about a hot topic. What's up, man? Welcome.
Howdy. That's a flashy intro, man. I got to give you one of those. That's pretty slick.
I got a good friend who can make one for you if you're interested.
I'll chat with him, yeah.
really catchy with it. Jonathan Sheffield, man, thanks for the intro, my friend. Look, I got to tell you, even sometimes today, it's like almost like what you're raised to believe for so long. It almost seems in our own head difficult to swallow that we, as complex as we are today, could come from simple organic compounds, you know, something like from different chemistry, if you will, using the term, different elements that over certain conditions in certain places over a certain amount of time, here we become very simple organic compounds into the complexity that we are today. It almost seems like a theist would go, well, dude, don't you see there's a hand of God at work here? Now, before we even get into anything, if you don't mind, I'd like to do a little intro, letting Dr. Tor make a statement, because one of the most popular videos he did that caught my attention, the stuff he knows is way over my head. I'm not a chemist, right? I have no clue. I'm scientifically illiterate. So I figured I'd let just this little intro play, and then I'd like to let everyone know how they can go and check you out and then get into the conversation, if you're okay with that. Awesome. All right. So you know this video quite well, I'm sure, and anyone who's probably a theist interested in this discussion knows, and here we are. Are you an expert on origin of life?
I'm a synthetic organic chemist. Origin of life is purely synthetic organic chemistry. There's no way around it. I'm perfectly situated to be commenting on this, to be critiquing the origin of life research. It is abiological. It is before biology takes over. This is purely synthetic organic chemistry. And making these compounds is very simple. 4 classes of compounds. You have to make them from what's available on a presumed prebiotic earth. And so the chemistry is not hard.
In case anyone's wondering, there are 2-part series that Dr. Dave responds to this, and like thoroughly responds to this. So, and it's down in the description. You can go watch the 3 videos he has, an initial one on pretty much what's the guy's motives here, and then the other 2 is like directly responding to the critiques from Dr. James Tor to Dave. Sorry.
For synthetic organic chemists to follow, and any trained synthetic organic chemist can follow me on this. And I've never seen a synthetic organic chemist disagree with me on this. In fact, the people that might disagree with me are biologists because they've never made anything. The only thing they may have made is they buy a kit and they make it, which is made by chemists, but they've never made anything ab initio. And so it's the synthetic chemist that can critique origin of life research better than anyone else. So go ahead, ask your synthetic chemist friends to listen to what I have to say. If they have anywhere a master's degree or beyond in synthetic organic chemistry, have them critique what I say.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And so Dr. Dave says, well, I have a master's degree, and I think I'll go ahead and do a critique. And you did. So how has the responses to your critique been? Have they been?
Yeah, I mean, okay, where to start? I mean, the response is, okay, so, I mean, just first of all, to backtrack, I didn't know we were going to, yeah, that's the video that I had seen many times, which prompted me to make an initial 45-minute video for lay people, you know, just kind of like, I found this video and this guy, it's not, you know, these are not accurate statements. And then he was so triggered by that he made a 14-part series about how dumb I am. So obviously that got me riled up a bit. So I really dug in and, you know, because he was playing the credentials game. You know, I know I'm a chemist, you're dumb, and you don't know what you're talking about. So I did a 2-part series, you know, 2.5 hours digging into 50 plus papers and interviewing researchers on the origin of life, and just really dismantling, because in the end, he's just an apologist. And I mean, he's a liar, quite frankly. And it all can boil down to that very first statement that you just played. The origin of life is purely synthetic organic chemistry. No, it's not. It isn't. And he either knows that and is lying, or or truly is that clueless and kind of ego driven to present himself as an expert in a field where he really does not. I mean, he truly does not understand the field beyond his script of lies. He really does not understand. He doesn't understand systems chemistry. He doesn't understand geochemistry. He doesn't understand astrochemistry. So he's really not an expert. I mean, he's not in the field. He doesn't understand origin of life research. So, yeah, so I had to go in and kind of like I did that first video. Then when he basically has this kind of script. He has these certain talking points, and one of them is earlier you were talking about what I wanted to respond to what you said right at the very beginning, where you're talking about from a theistic perspective, the complexity of life, right, would seem to suggest a designer. I just couldn't disagree more. I think that complexity is not the hallmark of design. Simplicity is the hallmark of design, right? When you use like an iPad or something like that, the hallmark, we can tell that it was designed because of how simple it is, right? There's one little button and it's very intuitive, right? Life is not like that. Life is exceedingly complex due to the random nature of its formation. So anyway, I don't know how far, I didn't know where we were going to go with this conversation. I don't know how much into the weeds you want to get with my tour response. I'm happy to talk about any of it. But yeah, just guide me. Let me know what you want to discuss.
Look, I already know you can go into the weeds. I trust me. Anyone who watches any of your videos can know, like, you don't leave any stone unturned trying to evaluate the information. And one of the things I respect about you in our conversation, even before I hit record, was if I'm wrong, I'm just going to say, or if I don't know, I'm going to say like I don't know, or we don't know. So real quick, how the hell did you get 1.45 million subscribers? I need the special juice that you have.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it all started, this was 2014. I was trying to look for some ways of making some passive income so I could sustain, I was more into music at the time and wanted some passive income revenue stream. And so I heard some people were throwing educational content up on YouTube and you could make money that way. And I had, just been teaching organic chemistry at a trade university. So for about 4 years, I was lecturing organic chemistry. And so I had kind of like, I had honed those lectures. I had designed my course and I gotten really good over 8 or 9 semesters of teaching that I could really deliver that content really well. So I filmed my OChem lectures just like with a whiteboard and writing, just basically like I was teaching my class, and I put those up, a little bit of branding and things, and people really liked them. At the time, there's not very much OChem stuff up there. There's like Khan Academy, maybe 1 or 2 other things. So people thought, wow, this is great. You should do more. So I started to do general chemistry. Then I did some animations, with green screen and everything. And then I just kept going from there. And I've always just tried to deliver the learning objectives, the topics that high school and undergrad students are learning in class with extreme clarity, succinctness. Just this is what you're learning in class, and maybe you don't like reading textbooks, or your instructor maybe isn't that clear, or maybe they are and it's just really hard, and you need a little more help. And so here's a little video. This is what you learned today, and it can't get clearer than this. And so that's sort of been the basis of my channel for a long time. Then, in the past couple of years, I started to get a little bit of the debunking stuff. So that's been a newer avenue for me, which I really enjoy. Not as many people seem to be down for the amount of effort. The tour thing was the most work I've ever done. I mean, to go back to what you're saying, I'm definitely not like Tour has more expertise than I do in chemistry. Obviously,
right.
He's a chemist. But I am trained. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. I did most of a master's in synthetic organic chemistry. Then I switched over to science education to get the degree. But, I know how to read papers. They're comprehensible to me, sometimes with some difficulty. But, I understand chemistry. You can't it's not gibberish to me. I may have to look into stuff a little bit, but I understand the fundamentals very well and I explain them very well. And so, a lot of his claims are blatantly false at face value, but then a lot of his claims require that you look into literature and find examples in literature that contradict what he's saying. And so, he, with his 14-part series, quite predictably, he leaned on his laurels a lot and like, look, I'm this really great chemist. Obviously, I'm right and this bozo's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. But that's just sort of a facade that he uses to you know, he'll regularly go on these long tangents where he just uses the terminology in his field that he understands very well, but is nevertheless completely irrelevant to abiogenesis. He'll talk for half an hour about like you know, carbohydrate synthesis, that they're not even natural products. Like it's literally not related to abiogenesis at all. But because he is smart and he knows what he's talking about, people are like, well, he must be right about everything he says. Well, he's explaining that synthesis, but it doesn't have anything to do with anything. So, you know, I had to like, my video was for lay people. His was taking the approach of like, I know so much, look at all these papers I can reference, but he's lying when he references them. So then for my response, obviously I had to go way beyond what it was for the lay people. And so for my response videos, a lot of people, it's probably going over their head as well. They can listen to James, they can listen to me. They don't understand what either of us are saying.
Yeah, but you do the visuals. You actually show quite a bit of visuals, and I doesn't mean I understand all that you're saying, but with the visuals and what you were trying to explain, I could keep up, you know. And I mean, not everyone maybe can, but real quick, if you don't mind, before we continue, I want to let everyone know they can also go check you out on Patreon. Is there anything specific that you do with your Patreon, or is this just for people who like support you?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't do too much. It was just people wanted a way to support, like if they, you know, if I save them a lot of money in tutoring or something like that.
Oh, wow.
They can go offer, because it's like, you know, my tutorials can serve almost like tutoring. It's not it's not personalized, but it's, you know, if you need help with a particular topic. So this is just, you know, people who like a particular creator have you know, some, if they can afford it. I know a lot of students can't afford it. So it's like, like, I don't, this is strictly if you want to.
Also, what's this thing right here?
I wrote a book last year, actually came out in March. Is this Wi-Fi organic? So it kind of combines the two things I do. So it's there's sort of chapters that condense the truly indispensable information in chemistry, biochemistry, biology, and physics, and then applies them towards kind of identifying misinformation in pseudoscience. So it's really like a pocket guide. It's pretty short. It's a quick read. You could knock it out like, you know, JFK to LAX pretty quick. And it's just like, if you really want those basics, like, because I find that, you know, a lot of people who fall for misinformation or pseudoscience, it could be avoided if they simply knew the basics about, like, you know, what is DNA and what does it do? What is a cell? What are cellular processes all about? What is a molecule? What are the properties of molecules? You know, really basic stuff. So yeah, it kind of combines the two things I do, because I do need everybody to have that basic information, the very basic, you know, we're talking about 9th, 10th grade understanding of certain principles, and then apply them to, this is a scam. This is, you know, the whole alt health industry is preying on chemophobia and, you know, identifying anti-establishment narratives and disarming them, things like that.
Wow. Powerful. Self-plug here. If you don't know already, join our Patreon. There are tons and tons of videos that have not been released to the public that, you know, will eventually one day make it to the light of YouTube. I also started a podcast. So in a few days, I'll be launching that. That'll be on Apple, iTunes, you know, Spotify, you name it, for the channel in audio. So you can download it. It's been forever. I mean, I've been called MythVision Podcast for like 3 years and haven't had a podcast. So now we finally are. But yeah, come join us, support us on Patreon. If you like what we do here at MythVision, thank you so much for that, Dr. Dave. All right. So first question I'd like to ask is, would you be, and this is irrelevant to the whole like arguments yet, but I've heard Dr. James say, I'll debate anyone, or he supposedly issued a debate to you, but you won't debate him or something like that. Would you be willing to debate him? Or if not, why not?
I don't know. First of all, I just find it hilarious. Like, I heard this through the grapevine. Like, it really demonstrates the pageantry of the offer. Nobody contact me directly. Like, you'd think he'd like email me or something. My email is very readily available if he really wanted to interact with me. No, he's just grandstanding. You know, because he isn't capable of issuing a response to my response to him, because it's extremely thorough and really, really picks apart his script and shows the invalidity of all of his talking points. And so he just, you know, he needs a way to pretend that he's above it. You know, there's nothing to debate.
I'm sorry. Would you say he's the leading theistic proponent on this whole thing and in the world right now?
I mean, I think he's the leading theistic detractor of origin of life research. That's why I felt like going after him, because you know, he had been essentially unchallenged. I couldn't find any content refuting his claims on YouTube. So I thought, well, I guess I better do it because nobody else seems to be doing it. Like the stuff the guy says is insane. I mean, he's lying, so somebody should say so. And I think that's why he got so triggered and so threatened by that initial video I made, because, you know, it got a couple 100,000 views. And so I think everybody at Discovery Institute was like, James, you got to do something because, you know, this guy's, you know, he's countering your claims. You know, you got to save face. So he did this ridiculous stunt. I mean, I was kind of flabbergasted. Like, it was just a recycling of all his talking points, but just Dave is dumb, Dave is dumb, Dave is dumb every 10 seconds. And it's like,
He said those
okay.
words. I haven't even watched this 14-part series, but does he kind of say those words, or he
not
acts
dumb.
like you're dumb?
He calls me clueless. He has no idea what he's talking about. He keeps flashing a Dunning-Kruger chart. Just because people speak confidently doesn't mean they know a particular topic. It's like, dude, you're describing yourself. You have no clue what you're talking about. I mean, beyond the dishonesty, I genuinely believe that there are areas of origin of life research he just does not understand when he's talking about crystallizations and solid state chemistry, and definitely geochemistry. Knows nothing about astrochemistry, knows nothing about systems chemistry. I don't think he knew that systems chemistry exists. Like, he tried to define autocatalysis and kind of couldn't, and then just kind of ignores the whole field, you know. And that's kind of the main thing with abiogenesis, and that is what leads to these fallacious talking points that creationists put forward. They'll say, if origin of life is, you know, if abiogenesis is possible, why can't we observe it? Why haven't we observed it? And why can't scientists do it? Why can't scientists synthesize a cell? It's like, well, okay, I can see how in complete ignorance of any scientific discipline you might come to that conclusion, but the creation of synthetic life is not a goal of origin of life research. It's completely unrelated. There are other researchers like Craig Venter and a bunch of other people who work in synthetic life, and it's really fascinating area. It has almost nothing to do with origin of life research, because I think that what people do is they envision nature, like they imagine that the proposition of abiogenesis is that a bunch of molecules floated together, boom, and there was a cell, and that was life. And that never happened. Nature didn't do that. That's not what happened in nature. So to expect a scientist to do that is the epitome of a straw man. It's ridiculous. So this is what systems chemistry is all about. We're talking about systems of molecules, be they, you know, nucleic acids, proteins, and otherwise, encapsulated in vesicles, going over selection, going over selection processes. We're talking about a kind of evolution over millions and millions of years until that system of molecules became sophisticated enough to be called life. So origin of life research is about elucidating those pathways. We're looking at what was going on with those molecules. And so people like Jack Shostak, they're doing all this incredible work that is looking at the capacity for systems of molecules to evolve. They're showing a kind of natural selection, and I cover a few of these papers in my series. Certainly not all of them, but definitely some key ones. And so, you know, it takes talking points like when James says repeatedly with this religious fervor, there is no selection prior to life. There is no selection on the molecular level. Well, I'm sorry, you are objectively wrong. Here are studies exhibiting selection on the molecular level. So, you know, that was kind of what I wanted to do, was to, you know, it was obvious that my first video was not sufficient, I think, for people in his camp, where I was doing it sort of for lay people, just kind of surface level deconstructing some of his claims. But then it's like, all right, if you're going to play the game of here's all the papers, David and Shoney papers, all right, I got papers too, man. When you say, how do you do peptide formation in water? Okay, here's a paper. It says peptide formation in aqueous solution. Like, that's the title of the paper. So you're wrong and lying, you know.
You quote a lot of in the video, and I'm sure you are aware, and I'll just ask this for our audience who may not have seen this. Are there other scholars that this is their field of research who say this James guy's totally mistaken here?
Yeah, all of them. All of them know he's a complete clown. I mean, in order to make my response as good as it was, I did correspond with a number of origin of life researchers. So obviously a couple of them agreed to appear in the videos, but I talked to a lot more. I talked to most of them. I talked to most of the prominent ones. And the response from most of them was, and I won't name them by name because they didn't want to be involved in that video, was just like, look, this guy's a fraud. We support what you're doing. Send me the script. I'll look over it. I'll send you a couple papers, like, oh, when you talk about this here, here's a paper that supports what you're saying. So you can use that. So I had a little bit of coaching from them, and well, not coaching, but just like they help reinforce. They want to see this kind of rhetoric squashed as well. Because it's not conducive to it sullies public perception of science, right? James wants everyone to believe that all origin of life researchers in the world are either corrupt or stupid, right? That they don't understand, and him, who's not in the field, knows better than all of them, right? That's the narrative that he's trying to spin here, which is insane.
Like his first statement, synthetic, organic,
yeah. And
yeah,
it's not. It's just
real quick, for those in the chat who are obviously against everything Dr. Dave is saying, and there are people who are going to disagree with you, and that's totally fine. I even tagged Dr. James Tour in the title of this video. I hope that some of his followers will see this, because look, this is what I do. I like to see the controversy, test out what's going on here, and let people consider it. But they really should watch your series because you give visual representation of this, and you show and cite the papers and stuff. It's not just what Dave has to say. It is what the field at large. That's the point. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with me. I'm not an origin of life researcher. Neither is James, by the way. It has nothing to do with me. I'm citing the literature that proves what he says is wrong, right? And I'm proving that, by the way, you don't have to be an expert. I'm not an expert. I have some specialized knowledge. I studied chemistry. I did some chemistry. I taught chemistry. So, I'm well versed in the language of chemistry. I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not an expert. James is an expert in his field, and if he was giving a lecture on how to build nanocars, I'd gladly listen. He is an expert in how to build nanocars. That's and if that's all he ever talked about, I would praise him as a great scientist. But unfortunately, I as I'm not a psychologist, I can't say to what degree he is being deluded by his belief system versus deliberate deception through the Discovery Institute. I don't really know how much he believes what he says, but what I can do is cite the literature that shows how he is objectively wrong. But
yeah, this brings us to, now that we're past the whole, you can always direct if you'd like to mention whatever he might say, because I think he's a lead example for theists who want to argue against abiogenesis. But for those of us who are mostly knuckleheads on this topic, who don't understand how the heck can you get life from different compounds when we can't create it, like we talked about this, they had the Miller experiment. Yes, that experiment. I remember in biology class as a theist, didn't believe in this. They were showing that under certain circumstances, putting heat and having pretty much what you have is like a bacteria develop. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that's not right. The Miller-Urey experiment produced amino acids and some other biomolecules. So I'm an idiot. It's literally the very, very first step. So yeah, this is the thing. Like a creationist could be justified in getting upset that somebody, supporting a naturalistic explanation for the origin of life would say Miller-Urey experiment, therefore it's all set. No, of course not. It was one tiny little thing, and that was the 1950s, by the way. But what James and some other people like to pretend is that the field hasn't progressed in 70 years, which is insane. Most of the papers I cited in my response were from the past decade. What has been done in the past decade alone is astounding. And most of that, a lot of that has to do with systems chemistry and other fields. But the problem is that it's really dense. It's really dense. I was reading some of those papers in systems chemistry and just like, oh God, all right. Okay, start again, read from the top. It's dense, And so it's very easy for creationists to just go, well, that's not real. It's too hard to understand, so it's not real, But they don't understand James when he talks either. They have no clue what he's talking about. They love it. Well, they love it. See, the problem is that with creationists, with creationists, there are so few legitimate scientists that are in that camp. And so when they get one, they try to build them up and praise them as the greatest scientist of all time. And in James's case, the problem is that he is actually a good scientist, right? He's a good chemist, and so you know, you can imagine, you know, that's why he's the Discovery Institute's little darling, is because he is a good scientist. It's so hard to find a good scientist that will spew this kind of rhetoric. But so, you know, that's why it becomes the credentials game. You know, people who come over to those response videos, I mean, obviously they don't watch it. They don't even press play, or they press play and get triggered really quickly and run away. But you know, pretty much any comment detracting on those videos says nothing concrete about the video, makes no attempt to refute anything, just says James is a brilliant chemist and you're not, so he's right and you're wrong. Well, all right, man. Like,
right.
I don't know what to tell you.
In that vein of abiogenesis, this is a question I get, or a statement I'll see from the theists all the time, that first of all, you don't know how it happened, right? Which is like meaning open the door, because God probably zapped the first life, or you could say extraterrestrials. Like, so what James says, as we played at the beginning, that this is synthetic organic chemistry or whatever, like a someone built life. You have to have already existing life to build it. How do we go from non-life to life? And maybe you can just kind of explain that as simple as possible. I know that's very complex ordeal to really explain this, but you mentioned like astral chemistry and things like that. Like, you're telling me that there were organic compounds in space that potentially have the forms.
There are organic.
Tell us how all this kind of fits together, if you don't mind.
We can see through spectroscopic methods that there are organic compounds in space. They're there. I mean, they're there. So those are basic building blocks. I mean, this has nothing to do with panspermia. I mean, the idea of like extraterrestrials cultivating life. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey is my favorite movie of all time. So it's a really cool idea, but there's nothing, you know, that's, some people can study that. But that's not something that I would propose per se. Yeah, I mean, I kind of explained it earlier when I was talking about systems chemistry. I mean, you need the basic building blocks, or as James calls them, the building blocks of the building blocks. The building blocks of the building blocks are omnipresent. They're everywhere. They're in space. They're very readily formed. They're very easy to form. We're talking about very small molecules with 3-5 atoms in them. You know, nothing crazy. But then they're all the building blocks, right? Your nucleic acids and your proteins, et cetera, they're polymers. So you need the little units, you need them to polymerize. And so there's been plenty of studies showing how this can happen for all of the main classes of biomolecules. And then the real trick is getting those, not getting encapsulated in vesicles. That's no problem. That's, you know, we're looking at spontaneous bilayer formation or monolayer. I mean, again, we're going to get into the weeds of, the gradients and everything. But yeah, most of it is systems chemistry. And this is that main straw man that I was talking about earlier of creationists wanting a chemist to go, okay, I put all these ingredients in and they made a cell. It's like, well, no, nature also didn't do that. So that has nothing to do with what origin of life researchers are trying to do. You have other guys that are doing other researchers that are researching synthetic life, and they will probably eventually succeed in synthesizing some form of life, but it will not have anything to do with how abiogenesis occurred, right? Because that's designed. That's right. That's something completely different. Yeah, unfortunately, apart from what I said earlier about systems chemistry and how we're looking at selection on molecular level, right? When you have a system of molecules that is better suited towards replication and energy production, it'll be selected for. So even though that system of molecules doesn't qualify as a living organism, we're still looking at selection at the molecular level. It's just statistical dynamics, right? There's no like divide, right? The thing that we've been learning over the past 20 years is that there's no non-life and life, right, and just like a line right here. It's actually, there's a spectrum, right? A physicochemical continuum, and it's blurry. We're not, if we were to go back billions of years and watch the whole process, it would be pretty hard to go, okay, all right, now it's alive. That's not that easy to do. Right. We know that a couple of molecules is not life, and we know that a cell is life, but you know, when you look at the first thing that would have qualified as a protocell, it's not that easy to define. So, you know, maybe later we'll have some challenges in terms of how we define life if we get further with origin of life research. But yeah, systems chemistry, that's the key.
So as far as the question of is abiogenesis the case, it's not a question of is that the case. It's a matter of how did this happen? in what manner is this the case in scientific inquiry?
Yeah.
It's not like, well, did aliens bring us here? Now, of course, there's some people who think we were planted here, whatever. There's ideas out there, but as far
And
as in the field, sorry.
Yeah. No, just you finish up.
No, as far as in the field, it's not a question of is abiogenesis true in some sense, or did life originate naturally from completely organic compounds over a long period of time? That's not the question. It's just a matter of how it happened.
Yes, because you're describing science. I mean, the question in science is, here's, how do things happen? Life is here now, right? We know that.
Right.
So how did it get here? So creationists want to pretend that there's, that there should be, if we don't have 100% viable naturalistic explanation, therefore God. Right. Well, that's the God of the gaps, right? We've been doing this for a very long time now, right? We used to not know anything, so everything was God's, and then, a volcano is, we understand magma, and so that's not Hephaestus sitting in there making the thing, and that's why it's not that. It's actually, we understand, and rain and all, and then the sun is not Helios, it's actually a star, and then, look, the earth goes around. We started to learn things, and so the God of the gaps was diminished. And so there's really only two spots where the God of the gaps still has a little bit of room, and that's the origin of life and the origin of the universe. And if you want to believe in a God, see, this is the thing that makes me laugh the most about fundamentalist creationists, is you believe in a dumb God. You believe in a really lame God that like if you believe in a God that triggered the initial singularity and then watched the universe progress, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. But if you want to pretend that your God was incapable of creating a universe with the conditions such that life could arise, and that he had to kind of like wait a long time and then go, shoot, it's not happening. What should I do? Maybe I'll make this go over here. It's like, why do you believe in such a lame God? I think the answer to that is that most of them don't believe in that God. They believe in the young earth creationist God. And so they're trying to feign compatibility with science to get there. But I just don't understand it at all. Like, why would God create a universe that's conducive to the formation of life, if that's the kind of God you want to believe in?
Yeah, that was pretty. You just took your shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
And I see why younger.
To finish the point, though,
Go
the point is that science, right? People criticize science for being materialistic or something like that. Science is the study of the physical world, right? So science does not resort to supernatural explanation ever. If you do that, it's not science. So this idea that, it's like, life is here. We're trying to figure out how it happened. So we've made a lot of progress, and we have, of course, no one is saying we know exactly what happened. That would be absurd. We do not, and maybe never will, but we're elucidating all of these plausible pathways for all of these characteristics of biomolecules and biological organisms to have arisen, and we're kind of filling it in. So it's like you have a jigsaw puzzle, and it's a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and you got 842 pieces in there. What is it? What's the hot air balloon? I can see that it's a hot air balloon. All right, I didn't fill in this top right corner here. We're not sure, got to get some more pieces, but like we can see, like based on what we know now, it is not insane or inconceivable that life can have arisen by natural processes. We have more to learn, but we're not where we were 200 years ago, where it's like, who knows? We don't know anything.
I think this is a great point you bring up about the baggage that we carry from ancient religions that are often emotionally tied into us because of the way we were either brought up by our family or in the regions we're brought up where a particular religion is the case. It serves a social function. And of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But the fact that we once thought, like you said, volcanoes. I mean, even some argue that Yahweh was a volcanic deity, potentially at some points within the Bible. He's equivalent to a mountain god, a storm god, all
angry god. I don't know what
a pissed off god.
I screwed up. I didn't make the life the way I wanted to. I'm going to start again, even though I'm omnipotent and omniscient.
Yeah, and I repent that I made man, but I'm not going to destroy them again after this. Yes, totally. I just say that to say, like, once we started to get and explain, okay, now we know why earthquakes happen. And it's not, titans under the earth that are bumping into the wall because there's no light beneath the earth. They're bumping into the wall, causing earthquakes. We've explained these things naturally. What I find happen is people want to project back anachronistically and say, oh, no. you read these literally, they never were meant literally. This is an allegory. They knew that that wasn't the literal truth. They may not have cared about the scientific reality of it. It's
and that's
all,
fine.
yeah, it's fine. Whatever they want to do. I'm just saying they're carrying baggage. And like you said, if 9 times out of 10, we now know why hurricanes happen, it's not because of homosexuality in California. You know, like things like that, when you now know, okay, there's natural explanations.
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, because I do agree. I think that the writers of ancient mythology did not intend for their mythology, their stories to be taken literally. It's just that humans have an inability to deal with the unknown, right? We need to explain things whether we understand them or not. And we're also storytelling species, that we just are. We like stories. And so we're going to create stories, and we're going to talk about phenomena, what we fear, what we revere, our desires, what we want to become, and this is just what we do. And I think the problem is, as you point out, the literalistic interpretation of these things, which I don't think was necessarily intended, but I think was more recognized as a potential tool for oppression. And as you also said earlier, I think the main problem lies in what you were told in your formative years. I feel very fortunate that I was not raised with any religion. And so when I became of like school going age and I heard what, that these worldviews existed, I was utterly perplexed. I'm talking even age 6 or so. I just, like, it sounded to me like Santa Claus and stuff like that. Like, it sounded to me indistinguishable from other commonly accepted myths that we know are just, like, it sounded to me like Roman mythology too, or Greek mythology, which we all pretty much all agree is just stories, right?
Right.
And so I just couldn't understand how there were all these stories, but then so many people think that this one, we got to go, this is the real one, we got to do this one. I just never understood that. And I think really the only explanation is early indoctrination.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately the case.
Real quick, super chat, Farsight. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate the super chat. Yeah, by definition, supernatural things cannot be investigated by science, but then neither can they be examined by any other reliable method. So, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's so much BS going on out there, and people are taking advantage of this. I watched the recent, and we're getting off topic, but I want to get back on topic. Recent Dan Brown, he does the whole mentalism, and he's an atheist. Magician. Love his stuff. He gave an atheist a religious experience, and then he tells her after he like tricked her into it, he's like, listen, I know that what you felt was authentic and real, but he was like, I want you to know that I literally synthetically created this experiment.
liberal usage of the term.
I mean, like it, huh?
Look, we have profound experiences, and we experience the human condition, and we yearn for infinity, and we fear death, and I understand why religion arose, and I don't hate, like, I think it was an important part of the evolution of human civilization. And I don't seek to eradicate religion, honestly. I think we'd be better off without it, quite frankly. But it's not my goal to yank anyone's religion from them, right? We like stories, and we like rituals, and we like feeling connected to the past. And, that there's nothing wrong with that, right? I just want to take, and I also have no problem with people who allow their religion to change over time, to fit empirical science, right? To leave room for empirical science. If your religion does not infringe on science, I have absolutely no problem with it. You can have your God, and you can have your holidays, and your prayer, and your religion, all these things, right? Prayer is essentially just meditation. I mean, we're very complex organisms, humans, and we're ritualistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. But where religion begins to deny the validity of empirical science, I have a problem, and I step in and I try to expose the lies and script of apologists and charlatans. And so I think they have a very, very negative influence on society and on mankind. So
the real question is Kent Hovind your best friend?
He's
I saw your video. For anyone who hasn't seen it, you take the time in your personal video when you play the one from Modern Day Debate. I'm good friends with James, by the way. And you were like, listen, guys, I don't usually do this. and I'm not usually such a jerk in a way, but I had to. This guy is spouting dangerous ideology, and it really is. It's ridiculous, the stuff the guy says. I used to listen to him, by the way. I used to actually follow him as a Christian and listen to what he said and believe.
A lot of people did.
How come there's trees going through multiple stratum? And Aaron Ra does a series on like debunking this guy. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know Aaron, and I have seen some of his content. Yeah, I mean, he's well suited for debunking that sort of stuff. Yeah, but I mean, Kent. I mean, apologists are all the same. I mean, they have a script, and they want to deliver these fallacious talking points. The degree to which they know they're lying or not is, again, I'm not a psychologist, but I mean, Kent is definitely lying. Kent is as big a con man as you can get. There's no other way. One must be aggressive, probably with most apologists. I imagine probably with James too, if I was to be one-on-one with him, because the stories I've heard, people who the handful of people who have taken him up and gone into his office, he just ends up screaming them out of his room. But Kent, I mean, he lies 5 times per sentence. You got to cut him off and repeat it. I mean, there were multiple times in that exchange where I disproved what he said to his face, and then he just said it again. It's like, are you out? Like, I think that's why, and looking back, I kind of wish I could have redone that one and stayed a little calmer, but it's quite infuriating. I mean, he's just this brick wall. It's just like, this is my script of lies. This is my livelihood. This is how I make money. And you're not going to tear it down. I don't care how many truth bombs you throw at this brick wall. I'm going to stay standing. And wow. It's astounding. I was taken aback. I really wasn't prepared for that level. I knew he was a liar, but I wasn't ready for that level of dishonesty. Where it's just like, I just explained why you're wrong to you very clearly. And then he just says it again. You believe you came from a rock. It's like, oh my God. I got to get out of here.
So what do you say to someone who says, okay, the fossil records don't support that we come from other species, right? I know this is if you're going to explain how evolution works, it is complex. It's not simple. Like, it's almost easy to say something like all species are transitional species, technically, because we're all transitioning over time. There's a change taking place, and it's very minor. Sometimes I wonder if it's bigger at times when, like,
the discrepancy would be that we label the ones transitional that are not extant, right? They're not here now.
Right.
Yeah. But
how would
yes,
you explain that?
mean.
Like, the transitional fossil record isn't like, you would think there's as many fossils, right, that people would expect. Why aren't we just digging up all of these, like, constantly digging up evidence of these transitional fossils?
Well, we are, and they're there. People who say that don't even take 5 seconds to Google list of transitional fossils. You could do that, read one Wikipedia entry, and just have your mind blown at how many transitional fossils we have. It's insane. Whatever transition you're talking about, right, from aquatic life to early land life, from reptile to bird, from the emergence of mammals, and then the progression of mammals from land mammals back to sea mammals. We've got them all. Like, I mean, not all, but we have hundreds in between extant species, tons of them. And I don't know. I mean, we could go anywhere from here. There's so many fallacious talking points.
I'd love to see you throw up some of the fallacious points that are brought up that are probably popular, because one of the things I would want to say, if you could correct me if I'm wrong about this, but from what I understand, the fossilization is also something that isn't as common as you would expect. Like, people expect every species to just pop up and you have all this evidence. It's under certain special conditions in which fossilization is even a case. Like, if you go kill someone and bury them in a forest where it's extremely moist, their bones aren't going to probably last a couple 100,000 years. You're not going to have evidence that you buried that person in that woods. But if you took them to the Dead Sea area, let's just say, and buried them in the sand, millions of years from now, you potentially might find this guy, or under certain conditions, fossilization happens. So it's not replete on the level that they would expect, but they're expecting this grand, absolute, every single imaginable fossil, like transitioning between us and our ancient cousins, if you will. Like, they want every single thing a mile long of every little tiny sequential difference in the human, or not in the human, but in evolution from us, you know?
Yeah, obviously not every single organism fossilizes, but again, they haven't looked into it at all, not even for 10 seconds, because if they did, they would find that there's a lot, way more than they expect, and more than enough to substantiate evolution. Right? I mean, it's bizarre to me that people it's like, what if evolution were not the case, why is everything we find supportive of evolution? Right? You would think that there would be insurmountable gaps. You would think that there would be similar organisms with like a different polymerase enzyme or something, you know what I mean? Like something where it's just like, well, that's inexplicable. I mean, but no, the lineage of, on the molecular level, on the cellular level, on the organismal level, everything is perfectly aligned with predictions of evolutionary biology. But that's why apologists like Kant is the most blatant of them. Others, see, the movement now is to try to seem more scientific. So Kant, even among creationists, is sort of a black sheep. They're like, that guy's a bozo. Like he makes us look really stupid, and they don't like him. But then the other ones, they try to appear very scientific. But in the end, there, people still just go back to these ridiculous talk. Like, you have to have straw men because it's so flawlessly aligned with the predictions of evolutionary biology. You have to create straw men. So that when you go to Kent, you're talking about like, why doesn't a whale give birth to a pine tree or something? It's like, it's almost astounding that something like that you would have to answer a question like that. But then again, there people go, yeah, why doesn't a whale give birth to pine?
He's got a point.
He's got a point. But I mean, you have to understand that there are these lineages, and the lineages are random, right? The change is random over time. And of course, you must understand the basics about genetics, right? And gene expression in order to understand how this can happen in the first place. But right, to all of the random chance that has produced these lineages, yes, it would be insane, first of all, for the precise lineage to happen again somehow, but of course not jumping 5 million speciation events at once. That's insane, right? So when I think that, the expectation among creationists is that one species should give birth to another species. Okay, but what they're qualifying as different species is like a cat and a rhinoceros. They're like, why? It's like, well, no one in their right mind would suggest that is something that you should see. That has nothing to do with evolution. If that happened, that would be a miracle. Mm-hmm. Then we would probably believe in God if a cat gave birth to a rhinoceros, right? That's so. I mean,
the Book of Enoch says that I think something like this: a white calf gave birth to a ram or a sheep or something like this, and it says this in Josephus as one of the miracles that are listed in this temple's destruction scene, that a calf gave birth to like a lamb or something like that. But so you're right. They would then go, see, we were right all along. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, first of all, I don't understand. Like any time you reference biblical scripture in a scientific debate, you're like, okay, you are admitting you lose. Like, you don't know, like, why would you do that? But second of all, I think that this is a symptom of, like, it's a very infantile and naive way of viewing. Like, if you look at colors, like, let's say you're a little kid and you learn about colors, right? And okay, what are the colors? There's red, green, blue, yellow. There's like 6 colors, whatever. You're like, those are the colors. That's all the colors. And I think that creationists kind of view life like that too. There's dogs and cats and bears and hippos and giraffes, and that's all the animals, right? Well, if you look at a color wheel, right, you find all of those gradations going from one color to the next, right? There's infinitely divisible, right? You can go down to the pixel and you can see, from blue to red, like, we're hitting. So, and as you grow up and you get older, you learn about other shades, and periwinkle and royal blue and chartreuse, and I don't know what all these colors are, but turquoise. Yeah, we've named them, right? We've named them, and those are arbitrary, right? We say this shade is we made up a word for it, But it's the same with life. If you look at if you truly do actually try and go and like, what are the transitional species from, you know, aquatic life to early land life. And we have many fossils. Right? It is kind of analogous to that thing of like, oh, we're watching blue become red very slowly over, you know, hundreds of different intermediary shades. And the problem is that those are, you know, most of those are no longer extant species. So it's, if you don't look into this and you're just thinking, well, there's a fish and there's a squirrel, so what happened? You know, how did you get a squirrel from a fish? It's like, you know, like try at all to find the answer to your question. Try any amount at all. And I think you'll be surprised to find that it's, you know, it's the internet age. All the information is there. Like you willful ignorance. I mean, ignorance is a choice in this day and age. Everything that we know is online, and you may not understand all of it. If you want to understand it, then you got to learn some prerequisite information. But
there's a lot of misinformation too. That's the problem. There's more misinformation than there is good. Let me ask you this too. Aaron Raw in his series against Kent Hovind, which dude, I can't wait to see you and him like go on a video together, hanging out, talking about evolution. That would be the bomb. You'd be able to understand each other a lot too. But just because you're outspoken on YouTube about this stuff, Aaron Raw brought up this point against Kent, as you brought it up, and said, look, there are cats or dogs. He had a chart that can't breed with one another, not even genetically, right? So he says they're dogs. Like you would look at it and go, that's a dog. Like, you know, it's got to be a cartoon book, simple for them to see it. Yeah, and it's like, all right, there's a dog and there's another dog. You look at them and you go, that's the same. It's almost like a wolf, right? Wolf and a dog. There's some dogs that look like wolves. And for example, though, he showed that they don't genetically have a way of being able to mate and produce. They might hump each other, but I know dogs that try to hump cats. Okay, so does that make it's just part of their nature? So my point is like that makes them, in a sense, a different species, even though they're under the same category in some way. What do you do with that, Ken? And of course, there's no real explanation.
Dogs never produce non-dogs.
Yeah. And that's the problem. Like he showed that there are dogs that can't produce with other dogs genetically. They're too far away on the tree for them to be able to mate and reproduce.
So this is the problem, and this is the advantage that apologists have, is they exclusively use language that is intelligible to people who don't understand, who don't know anything about science. Which inevitably oversimplifies things in a deliberate and misleading way, whereas any answer to such questions requires scientific terminology and scientific concepts that people don't understand and in many cases don't want to understand. They will refuse. So it's like you can, you know, Kent says cats and dogs. Okay, what do you mean? What do you mean cats and dogs? What give me, like, you know, use taxa. We have a language in biology and we have specific taxa and they all have the Latin names and everything. What do you mean by cats and dogs, right? Are we talking about a family, or are you talking about a particular species, right? So, but when you want to counter those claims, which are fallacious, you have to use proper scientific terminology. And then there's a certain subset of people that will just boop, brain turns off. Right. You're talking science. Science is evil. Science is wrong. I'm going to listen to Kent because he says cats and dogs, and I know what cats and dogs are, I think, right? So that's the huge challenge in countering apologists, is if they're clever, they construct arguments that seem simple to understand but are wrong. And then any debunking of those will necessarily then require scientific information that people can just ignore because it triggers them in a way, you know, like, oh, you're reminding me of science class and I didn't like it and I'm not going to listen to you. Right. It's sometimes the best apologists construct arguments whose responses are complicated enough that people will ignore them. Right. So it's hard for us to sometimes create those counter arguments that are as simple to understand as the lie. Right. That's the challenge. So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully I haven't spent too much time with evolution specifically. I took kind of this detour into abiogenesis, but I think maybe in the future I'd like to do some kind of like a layperson's guide to debunking creationist claims about evolution or something like that, and just like take everything on Answers in Genesis and like, this is wrong, here's why, this is wrong, here's why, this is wrong, here's why, and make the answers are there. Other people have answered these already. Maybe I can make them even simpler though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's the goal. It's
Yeah.
always about making, and you're really the best at simplifying
I
all
think
of
that's a
this.
skill I have. Yeah. So I'd like
Yeah.
to try to put that to use in this particular realm. It's just hard because there's so much. Like I took a big aside into physics and astrophysics, and I was countering a bunch of like quack
I saw
astrophysics
your
claims.
Thunderbolt project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thunderbolts and these other guys, and now I'm really I have a lot of focus on the alt health industry and like quack medical claims and stuff. There's just so much to do. It's like and then you're like evolution. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk about that too. It's just there's so much, and it's gonna take 50 years to like get through all this stuff. But
Well,
yeah,
I
we'll
look
try.
forward to seeing your evolution stuff, and
Mhm.
I know that you're always going out of your way to like say this is not how you do science. These are the problems that we see with these. And I'm actually watching your Thunderbolt project now because I know some friends of mine who've, hey, watch this, man. Like it's going to turn
Yeah.
everything upside down. If I could ask, what are some of the big problems that you hear from theists about evolution that you would like to address? Maybe we did the transitional fossils. Obviously, we talked at
Yeah.
least a little bit about it.
I mean, yeah, really just the misconceptions about. I mean, I think a lot of it is just not like I would like for theists. I don't want to use the word theist. I want to say,
Right. Because not
like,
all are, yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can totally be a theist and be, understand all kinds of science. Young Earth creationist or evolution denier. I would say, if you could just learn, like, watch my tutorials on nucleic acids and gene expression. Because I think that a lot of people don't, and not just creationists. I mean, I think a lot of lay people that are not anti-science also don't really know what gene expression is, and therefore don't know what DNA is, right? And so we all learn DNA is the genetic code, and DNA is okay. How? What are you talking? What does that mean, right? What is the process by which this qualifies as a code, right? And protein production, and so in general, and then also in an embryonic sense, right? I mean, I think that something I would like to harp on a little more with Ken. He was talking about how does this organism turn into this, or first of all, it doesn't turn into, right? We're talking about a lineage of many generations, thousands, millions of generations in between, but he was having a hard time understanding how a unicellular organism becomes varied multicellular organisms. Well, okay, we all begin as one cell, right? We were all humans. We were once a zygote. We were one cell. All right. How did that zygote become a person or whatever other organism? And so you cannot begin to comprehend that process without understanding gene expression, right? So you have there's DNA there, and that is being read and producing proteins, and then these proteins carry out all kinds of cellular functions. So we're talking about specialization, right? You have specialized cells, and then in terms of like creating limbs in select regions, there's apoptosis going on. So we have there's like webs, and then it kind of the cells die, and then so it's being sculpted by these instructions. So very clearly, if you can have mutations and the instructions change, the body plan can change, right? Once you start to understand gene expression, it's not really that crazy. It's not that hard to understand how bodily form can change. And then when you throw natural selection in there and you start looking at statistical dynamics, and you're saying, well, there's all these potentialities, there's all these different traits and behaviors, and those which lead to a higher probability of proliferation, a higher probability of survival, and therefore producing offspring, those traits will predominate statistically. It's just not, it becomes, I don't want to say trivial, but just not really that hard to get, and
if you're not aware of it, though, I could see how this would be definitely complex. So
if you literally don't know what gene expression is, then how could you possibly understand that? And then obviously, we once none of us knew what gene expression was. We once none of us knew what DNA is. We once none of us knew that molecules existed. Right. So I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for. I mean, I get it that we used to not know things. We used to not know anything, and then slowly we knew things, and now we know a lot. I mean, if we have to be to be perfectly frank, the 20th century was astounding. If you look at what we knew in 1900 and what we knew in 2000 in every field of science, chemistry, biology, astronomy, it's crazy. It's crazy how much progress occurred in the 20th century, and humanity's being left behind, unfortunately, right? Specialized knowledge in any field is so far beyond what is intuitive or immediately comprehensible to the layperson that it almost seems hopeless. And so some people understand that and have reverence for science, and they go, well, I don't really get it, but scientists are doing all these things, and I'm gonna trust what scientists say in some capacity, whatever that may be. But then there's people who react negatively to that and just sort of deny the entire edifice of science and call it all fake knowledge.
Yeah.
Ironically, on their computers over the internet given to them by science. So it's a really interesting facet of human psychology that would lead to that kind of behavior, but it's prevalent. It's very prevalent, and it's an enormous problem. And I think that's why science communication is emerging as a viable and very important profession right about now. In fact, when I began science communication, I had never even heard that term before. I think around 2017, someone told me, "Oh, you're a science communicator." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I am. That is what I am." Very cool.
We need people who can do it in a way that isn't just dry too, because the way the world is working online, people want to watch. We found a 30-foot giant. Like, it's a myth, but then we found fossils of a 30-foot giant, but we don't have the bones. And like, they go into these stories and it's all got the music and people are communicating it in such a way that it's got 3 million views. But the guy who's like, all right, giants are a myth, and we know why this myth would have arose in the Middle East, and go into the actual facts, you're usually dry and it's not as entertaining. And it's like, it's got 3,000 views, not 3 million. Real quick, got a few super chats and then continue if you don't mind. Farsight, thank you again for the super chat. Nintir, I believe, equals Lady of Life. Lady of the Rib, Eve, equals Hebrew for Lady of Life. It's a Sumerian pun. Interesting. I did not know that. Alan Bird says, what does your guest think of Stephen Jay Gould's non-overlapping magisteria and of his theory of punctuated equilibrium?
I don't think I could comment necessarily. I mean, I am aware of the term, but I don't know. I don't know necessarily enough to comment.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Alan, Stephen Jay Gould is a creationist, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong here. Maybe that'll give us some insight onto.
Yeah, I've heard the name, but I can't recall necessarily exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, look, I cut you off. I'll be looking for his comment to respond here. Maybe he has something else up his sleeve that might allow you to. But do you have a comment on non-overlapping magisterium?
No, I don't. I don't recall what that means.
Theory of punctuated equilibrium.
I mean, I'm aware of like different rates of equilibrium, and I think maybe it has something to do with there can be very rapid equilibrium, or there can be sort of periods of rapid equilibrium with very slow equilibrium in between. And so, I mean, these are just different phenomena, right? I mean, evolutionary change, it depends on a lot of variables, right? It depends on the environment, right? And if organisms are very, very, very well suited for their environment, there maybe is not necessarily going to be very rapid change. There will be random change, right? But it's not quite as directed, where you have change that is being directed towards fitting an ecological niche, right? So, I mean, when you have rapidly changing conditions, you have rapid evolution, and there's all kinds of cycles. There's all kinds of geological cycles, and so I'm definitely not an expert on any of this, but I think what it is that some creationists are probably like, well, this guy says that evolution can happen really fast like this, or it happens really slow. So which is it? It's like, well, all right, it's very, very it's a very unsophisticated way of looking at evolution. They're just people try to poke holes just by finding what they think are contradictory statements when they're not. So.
Yeah, and I've heard that too. I mean, I would suspect environment and the pressures of the particular environment in which you're living are going to create certain circumstances that will cause that organism to steer in certain directions, and it might force it to do so quicker. I don't know.
Mhm.
But like we stop using our pinkies, we'll end up with 4 fingers, maybe. I don't know, or something would probably happen to be different.
Well, it's harder to extrapolate that to humans because we're not participating in natural selection the way that life was prior to human civilization. So it becomes a lot trickier and more complicated to talk about human evolution, because that primary mechanism of natural selection, it does not apply to us anymore, right? If you are very weak and slow, you don't get eaten by a tiger. We all live in houses, and no, it's fine. We have police, and we have all these institutions set up to protect one another, which is good. That's because the physically weaker or less fit may have other ways to provide, or other value to humanity. So that's a great thing. But sorry, what were we talking about just before that?
Environment in which you're in might cause
oh yeah like
rapid...
can't have that dumb thing where I was grilling him on meiosis, and he's like, meiosis, why didn't rabbits grow wings? And it's like,
oh my god.
But that's the kind of straw man, it's like, oh, I can conceive of some magical thing that an organism could have that would make it better. All right, well, are rabbits well suited for their environment? They're alive right now, so yes, they are. So apparently they run fast enough that but I don't know. Yeah.
There's a lot there. I've watched a documentary where I can't remember what the name of it was. They're trying to find ways to modify the genome to help people like who are born with some type of disabilities or whatnot. They found ways to kind of splice. You probably know more about this or have heard about it, to splice the genome in that particular area to fix a certain gene so that someone who's going to potentially be born blind or have something else going on, they're fixing it. And there's this huge controversy about us playing God, so to speak, with our genes, especially when we're entering into something in the evolutionary process, because we sometimes could do something and not be able to reverse it and potentially cause extinction or something super dangerous to us. They were talking about destroying all mosquitoes because so much malaria that happens in Africa, for example. I don't know if you know about this documentary I'm talking about, but that playing into that, does that also kind of analogously go over to the whole idea of life evolving abiogenesis wise? Like, for example, when we're in the lab trying to create life as we define it now from these compounds, is it more difficult to try and create life in a laboratory than it would have been under natural circumstances, us trying to play God, so to speak, than just nature playing God itself? Does that make sense?
Kind of. I mean, it depends how you qualify it. I mean, we have sentience. So, I mean, obviously it's way, way immeasurably harder to just make a bunch of molecules come together and form life, because nature never did that either. That's insane. But we have the tool of sentience, right? That's why we can synthesize molecules that nature never figured out how to make, because we can deliberately elect to take things and put them in a glass vessel and heat it up, cool it down, use catalyst, whatever we want. So we have sentience. But that doesn't necessarily relate to. Sorry, what were you? A moment before that, you were saying something else. Are
you talking about the gene split?
Oh yeah, gene stuff. Yeah, I mean, yeah. See, this is a perfect example for why it is so imperative that we get very baseline public science literacy, because we're going into an era where, genetic engineering, it's a reality, right? CRISPR is astounding technology.
Right.
CRISPR is astounding technology, and it's only going to get better to the point where we can alter the genome of any cell and therefore, by extension, any organism at will. And the ramifications for this they're mind-boggling. And we need to make sure that we use it wisely. And the less people understand about it, the more easily they will be manipulated. Let's say someone wants to use the technology for some kind of nefarious intent. All they have to do is create a propaganda campaign that tricks people into thinking that they're doing something good. Right? And also smears those who accurately protest it. Right? And if the public does not understand anything that they're talking about, then it just becomes, how effective is your advertising campaign? right? Did you hit all those little buttons? Did you trigger fear? Did you do all these things? And then their lie becomes adopted as truth. Right? That's all it is. But if the more the public understands basic biochemistry and biology, the more readily they will be available to see through something and not be manipulated. And then that movement will not be able to gain traction, because we'll be able to push legislature and we'll be able to neutralize it, right? And we don't want to do eugenics. We don't want to do but we may want to eliminate certain genetic diseases, right? Maybe we want to do that. I don't know, right? This gets into very troublesome ethical terrain.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's incredible technology and we want to use it, but how are we going to use it? Right. We have to have a very, very earnest and conscientious decision about things like this. And we have to all be having this conversation, not just the select few people that truly understand it and stand to profit from it. Right. We need to all be able to, to some level, be able to have this conversation, or it's going to run away from us. And, I fear, like, I don't believe that we're going to find ourselves in an authoritarian regime 50 years from now. But if you think for a second that it's impossible and you turn your back to that possibility, it's not impossible.
Yeah,
it is possible. And we have to be vigilant and we have to make sure that doesn't happen. And ignorance is the fastest way to fall into that kind of a trap,
Interesting.
So.
Super chat from Mark. He's thanks for the super chat. He says he's just not prepared for real science questions.
Okay.
I think he's talking about you. I don't know. I think he's talking about you. I don't know. Mark, I appreciate the super chat. Farsight super chat. Yes, because nature would have way more time to play around. So the whole why can't we make something like what we think the original would have looked like? And this is so kindergarten for me to even say it this way, because when you talk about the color spectrum, for example, what do you mean by now we see it? Oh, this is an actual cell, like a full developed cell. Is there like a proto cell that we're not aware of how to identify at this moment, or we're not sure what that would actually look like? Can we create something like that? Well, it doesn't seem like we have. I don't know. I'm not a chemist. I haven't.
No, not ab initio. No, we haven't,
right,
of course.
But if you have, let's say, hundreds of millions or more of years to do this, then obviously we probably could. Do you think we'll be able to do something like that within the next 100 years with the science that we're at?
Probably, yes. But again, I mean, honestly, for the third time here, it doesn't really have anything to do with origin of life research, right? The process in synthetic chemistry, that's a field, and there are synthetic chemists that are working on this. Or synthetic biologists, I should say. Sorry, synthetic biology is a field that is working on that. But the process of learning how to construct a system that could be called a living organism from scratch, it does not really have anything to do with abiogenesis. So earlier I was talking a couple of times about systems chemistry and how we understand how those simplest biopolymers can have arisen and encapsulated in vesicles, right? So imagine you have a vesicle and you have some RNA in there and you have some proteins, and that's not life. But then over time, due to replicative processes, they refine in such a way such that it eventually becomes something that you would call a living protocell, right? I'm not equipped necessarily as leaders in the field in systems chemistry would be able to describe that process. But again, I showed some very key papers in the field in that response to James Tour from Jack Shostak, some other people of that stature. And so that's it. I mean, I'm not equipped to turn this into a lecture in systems chemistry, but that's what it is. You have systems of molecules that are complexifying over time until it becomes a system with the biochemical processes required, metabolism and so forth, that would allow that system to be qualified as something that we would call life, right? And unfortunately, synthetic biology, as incredible of a field as that is, they're just not really, I mean, they're obviously somewhat related, but I think that creationists want to pretend that they're the same field, and they're not. So anytime a creationist says, why can't scientists make a cell. It's like, all right, you don't even know what the goals of the field are. You don't even know what you're criticizing. You don't even know what these people are doing, let alone have you like actually read the papers or anything. I mean, you can't. I mean, they're hard to read. So yeah, that's something that I tried to make quite abundantly clear in my response there to James.
So if I may, for someone simple-minded like me on these topics, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just know how throughout history, how Christian apologists, I'm using Christians as an example, but there's many versions of this, whether they're from the Islam faith or, you know, Judaism, you name it. They always kind of push God to a more complex, you know, thing is, well, he's not like a man. He's beyond your comprehension. It's unimaginable. Well, if you read some of the Old Testament, it does seem kind of like a man, but just a little enhanced.
Yeah.
But so I make the point, like, and I get a lot of experts, PhDs, who come on and talk about the Bible and all these ancient religions. I got off track. So when I'm looking at this and I say, okay, if they could produce, let's say, a proto cell, or even we were able to somehow create in a lab using all these non-living organic matter, here we go, combining it, and next thing you know, we have a cell, then someone, let's say Dr. James Tour, his whole theory would go, well, the chemistry is already there. God already has all the building blocks there. So there's always another cop out.
They'll have a response. Yeah, they'll have a response. And I think we will do that. I don't know when. I might not be alive, but you know, I think we will do that. But yeah, then Kent Hovind will just say, well, it didn't turn into a zebra. So you know, it's like they'll all have something ridiculous to say. It has nothing to do with science. It's just a script. It's just a script to divert attention. I mean, it's a very desperate attempt to deny science, and it's just science. It's just blanket science denial. So it doesn't really matter what the status of science is. I mean, it was a lot easier to deny science in 1850, right? They didn't have as much to point to, and it's going to get harder and harder as science progresses. But if you really, really want to deny science, you're gonna find a way to deny science, right? You can just here you go. None of this is real, you know, and it doesn't really matter what the status of science is. It doesn't matter if a protocell has been synthesized or what abiogenesis, which of the pathways we've shown to be plausible or what have you. You know, it's just specialized knowledge that somebody can say, nope, that's not real. I mean, I deal with flat earthers, and there's millions of images of the Earth from space, and they go, nope, CGI, not real. Okay, this was taken with a film photographic camera. This was taken on film in the 1960s. Nope, CGI. You know what I mean? Like, if you really want to be that person, there's no amount of science that's going to get you to acknowledge reality. You know, it's clearly something very personal that you're identifying with. It's become something. It's an identity, right? This is an identity that you're clinging to, and at that point, facts are not really going to help much. So yeah,
you're right. And I plan on doing. Hopefully, we get a chance. I plan on having you come on and to do the flat Earth discussion. I'll try and put some actual questions together, though. They're really good. That way, you're kind of like prepared on knowing where I'm going. But you do one of the most clear. And I mean, there's a lot of debunking flat Earth videos out there, but like, you're so like spot on, man. I really appreciate it. So hopefully we have you come on. BJ Chadwick, thank you for the super chat. Says thanks for your videos. I believe that's what they're trying to say. And I did a video yesterday, right? I released this public with Dr. Joshua Bowen. The Bible teaches flat Earth. It actually does. Because it's ancient Near Eastern cosmology. And he's pointing out like the Bible's in the same milieu as the ancient Near Eastern literature. So that doesn't mean the whole Bible. That just ancient Hebrew Genesis is in the same milieu. What do you do with that? Well, these guys, I wonder if Kent thinks the Earth is flat, or does he think flat Earthers are wackos and that he's somehow not?
He doesn't. Yeah, he hates flat Earthers.
Huh. It's weird. It's weird how this works, you know. Well,
even someone as unscientific as him tries to gain some scientific high ground by mocking, you know, admittedly as dumb, you know, as ridiculous as young Earth creationism is, it's not as dumb as flat Earth. So
wow.
Flat Earth really is the king. It really is the number one, just indefensible, you know, debunkable by looking at objects and thinking truly insane thing to believe. So
Your video about the moon
mhm.
and going through solar and lunar eclipses and whatnot, showing if this was, it just is well done. It was really
Mhm.
well done. I really look forward to that. Another super chat. S.J. Gold was a famous evolutionist, so I had that wrong. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
No, yeah, I had I was remembering him as a biologist, but yeah, with punctuated equilibrium, that's a dead giveaway. But yeah, I should read up a bit before I do my anti-evolution talking point takedown.
Well, he
Yeah.
really obviously said it would be a great read. He thinks you would love. So thank you,
Mhm.
Alan, for that. And Professor Dave, I seriously appreciate this. Look, we got one more super chat popped up.
Mhm.
Uh and then we're gonna wrap things up here. Really want to do the flat earth thing with you sometime soon. Nikolai says, what's your opinion on apologists like Craig, McGrath, and Collins? Are they doing more good than bad for science?
I don't know who those people are, but
William Lane Craig. Do you know William Lane Craig? He's
that rings a bell. But yeah, no, I cannot imagine that any apologist would be doing anything good for science. So I would have to say no.
interesting because I know he thinks old Earth, right? But then maybe a theistic evolution position, I would think, and that's a whole different discussion. I think to have you poke in, I'm sure you've
Mhm.
heard theistic evolution ideas, right?
I mean,
Not
I
just that God zapped it and then left it alone. Like it's like God's actively involved, and to me that does sound
mhm.
silly with what you said earlier. Like, hold
Yeah,
on.
I mean,
So it took him millions of years to actively be involved to finally get it to where we are, today.
it's like, what should I do next? Like, I thought your God was omniscient. What are you talking about? You know?
Wow. More than millions, sometimes billions. I mean,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
universe is so old. So, anyways, thank you so much. I ask that everybody goes, and once again, here's the YouTube channel. Please go check him out. He talks about a lot more than what we're talking about today. He debunks so many things. I mean, look at these videos, right? Like, there's a ton of videos. I'm scrolling pretty fast there, by the way. Lots of subscribers, man. Seriously, keep up the good work. I look forward to seeing you like way up there. Catch up to like Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
And
that would be something. I
go
would be
subscribe.
satisfied to just be a guest of his.
Hey, that would be cool. I'd like to make
Hmm.
that happen, but I'm afraid unless you're saying aliens are what we're recently seeing on camera, you're probably not going to show up there. You might have an ayahuasca entrance. You could say, "Look, I'll come on and take some psychedelics, and we can make the show happen." I just don't know if it would happen.
I don't know about live on camera. I'm no stranger to hallucinogens, but very much in private.
Yeah, you'd have a bad trip on camera or something. That'd be bad.
Yeah, no, I
Not a
wouldn't do it.
stranger either. Go check out his Patreon if you want to help support what he's doing and you believe in what he's trying to do to help better society and understanding science overall. It's not just one topic and debunking a lot of the pseudo claims that are out there. You can join him on his Patreon. Also, get his book. Is this Wi-Fi organic? Make sure you guys check his book out. It's not expensive on Kindle. Paperback's not expensive. And who reads it on Audible? Do you?
Oh yeah, yeah, I narrated it.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So I'll have to pick that up sometime and check out the audiobook. You said it's mainly about like debunking all these pseudo claims, scientific.
Yeah, I mean, I give kind of those qualifying passages, just like here's the very basics about chemistry, here's the very basics about biochemistry, biology, physics, and then we apply that knowledge to right. This claim is a scam because here's why it contradicts this very basic knowledge in biology or whatever it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Check out his book. Of course, I always like to plug my guest material so you guys know where you can help support them. These are ways in which you can help Dr. Farina. And I'm going to say her last name right? Farina?
I don't have a doctorate, but yeah, Farina.
Oh, okay. Professor. Sorry. That was a
Just
question that
Dave is
came in the
fine.
chat. Someone was like, is he really a professor?
I
And
used to teach I taught organic chemistry at a university, and now I'm a science communicator. So I mean, it's my channel is called Professor Dave Explains. I just go by Dave.
yeah.
But
Okay. I should have asked you that up front.
that's fine. I don't care.
Sorry.
Everybody can call me whatever you want. Yeah.
Check out the Patreon, MythVision. Guys, I've got like, I don't even know how many videos I'm editing right now. I've got like maybe 20 something videos that are going to be released here on the Patreon. You can also help support that and join there. Thank you for your time, your energy, and coming on with your insight. I did not want this to be overhead because when I wrote you last week, I was like, do you think we can do some visuals? You're like, I don't have any visuals prepared. I'm like, then we don't want to get too deep because really without a visual, this stuff we've already gone over many people's heads probably who are going to watch this. So I really appreciate that.
I'd rather direct people to I put a lot of work into the debunk. So if you're, if you want to learn more about abiogenesis, check out my recent 2-part response to James. I put a lot of work into that and referenced all the there's a lot of great visuals in there. I just to build them for a podcast, maybe not so much, but I love talking. So I love having a chat. Definitely. I'll do that anytime.
Well, I'm glad you came and checked this out, man. I hope you don't mind that the gods came to check out what we were doing today. One more time, I guess I'll show them. And if you don't mind, hold on 1 second as we leave, just so we could chat before I let you go.